We are live. I'm Rich Lieberman. It is a Thursday, and this is the YouTube Media Pulse that I am your broadcaster here in the San Francisco Bay Area. Now, look, this is something I want to talk about because I feel, not to sound righteous or anything like that, that one of the things that I try to separate myself from others and other entities is the fact that I like to be transparent, even if it's not something good or positive and is essentially negative. And anyway, so let me explain to you the situation and try to be as succinct as possible and maybe offer my own little side stories and we'll move on. We'll move forward because I didn't even want to talk about this and but I also don't believe in keeping you all in the dark. So, okay. So the other night I was speaking with Ron Owens and I called him completely spontaneously to ask how he was feeling, how's life going. He's been involved in a whole lot of travails with regards to his daughter, and completely spontaneous. And then I asked him again, very, very benignly, if he could possibly consider doing my show for about 20 minutes and that I would not take calls because I'm not set up, number one. Number two, and most importantly, I would not talk about, speaking of drama and travails, about the drama involving his daughter, which most of you know about. And those of you that don't, I'm not going to get involved in that because I just frankly don't want to, but it's out there. So I explained to him, and he was very, very vociferous about that. And I told him, no, I'm not going to talk about it because it's just something that I don't get off on. I'm not into real tabloid stuff to begin with. And so he said, okay, let's do 20 minutes. And I said, how about this Thursday? And that was 2 days ago. And he checked his appointment book and he said, yeah, that sounds good. So about 5 minutes later, he calls me back and says, hey, Rich, I can't do it. You've said so many bad things about me that were, lousy and disparate, really, really lousy. I said, Ron, I said, that's past tense. And what I said about you was based upon my feelings with regards to how you handled the cumulus thing and so forth. Let bygones be bygones. He said, you're right. Okay. And so I said, okay, we're on for Thursday, 10 o'clock in the morning. And he said, okay. I said, you're sure now? He said, okay. So at that point, I went and posted on Twitter that Ron would be a guest for about 20 minutes. I didn't specify that, but I said he'd be on my show. And it would be at 10 o'clock Pacific time and all that. Okay. So not a couple hours later, I get a text. And I thought about it. Talked to various people, including lawyers, and they don't think I should go on and talk because of the situation with Laura and a whole bunch of other stuff, mostly. So he says, I can't do it. And I shot him back a pretty, emphatic response. It wasn't very, well, let's just say it was diplomatic, and I was trying to be diplomatic. So in any event, in the spirit of trying to be transparent, I then said, and I will, because I wasn't going to talk about this, but several of you have inquired, and even the meatheads have inquired and all that. So when they're going to inquire no matter what. But out of respect to most of you who sent me emails and have commented here and on Twitter, what's going on, we thought that you're going to talk to Ron Owens and all that. So I think Ron has good intentions, still do. But I think he's got a few things going on in his life. And one of them he seized upon, which I spoke about and would still speak about it. Maybe not on the interview, but I'm still going to talk about it because he brought it up. And that is this. And I will forever be wanting to get out things that could perhaps be viewed as inconvenient, but they have to be brought out, and which may have led to his decision not to appear for the time being. As he noted, and as I completely acknowledged myself, when those articles in the Chronicle or SF Gate, what have you, and the Mercury appeared over a month ago detailing Ron's plight and his inability to catch up with what he regarded as certain issues that plagued him financially. And when he asked for money and raised about $150,000 to cover medical costs and things of that nature, I had no issues with that. We're all under the gun. We all have, not all of us, but from time to time, those of us have issues in life. And, anyway, Ron had stated things that propelled him to ask for support. Well, the authors of those articles in the Mercury News and SF Gate didn't inquire as to why Ron may have needed that money to get himself in the right, not just the medical issues, other issues. It wasn't brought up in either article. Those authors were, let's just say, very, shall we say, convenient and very nice to Ron without going into a lengthy dissertation as to why, perhaps, what led this situation to exist, why now, what was happening to somebody who used to make quite a bit of money in their respective trade. And also both articles failed to talk about the situation involving Ron and his daughter, which is very, very out there. And I don't want to get into that either because I don't want to draw the attention of those who have some maybe opinions, maybe have an agenda on both sides. So I chose not to talk about that. And the irony of ironies, I wouldn't have talked about it even if Ron and his wife Jan Black really, really urged me not to talk about it. Not in this interview that I had planned, but which led me to kind of basically resume our relationship as a friend and a friend. And I didn't want to talk about it to begin with, the situation with regards to Ron Owens and his daughter and his wife, Jan Black. So I had no interest in talking about that anyway. Now, that wasn't the only reason why. And by the way, I am bringing this up. I want to keep repeating myself because I know a lot of people tune in, they tune out, that kind of a thing. I had an interview set up with Ron Owens for Thursday, today, at about 10 o'clock. And we were going to just schmooze for 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. And I was going to ask him about his way of becoming a big time fixture in the Bay Area as a talk show host on KGO for well over 40 years. And the lifestyle, the fact that he was so beloved, admired, and became a big time fixture, not just in radio in the Bay Area, but and a Hall of Famer and a Marconi winner and all that. What it was like, from my standpoint, to growing up in the 70s, listening to KGO and Ron in particular, and to ask him questions on his KGO life, his talk show life, his want to be a great interviewer, which he was, and all the people that he met and the people that he interviewed, basically the business, how he became so huge, so wildly popular and, engrossing and, yada, yada, yada. Good times and bad times, and deal with things that not only affected him, but the entire Bay Area, like all the crazy things that happened in the 70s, the Milk Moscone murders, the zebra murders. Well, he wasn't here at that time, but Milk Moscone and the Jim Jones massacre, all that stuff, and interviews and political interviews and all that. That was going to be the gist of my interview with Ron Owens, and to convey somewhat a sort of a unique relationship between, at the time, a devoted listener who ultimately won the heart and soul and was invited on Ron Owens' show and became good friends. And that was something I wanted to touch upon also. That would have been the interview. And I know a lot of people looked forward to it, wanted to hear it, and experience something that, he didn't do many interviews. He did the interview in the papers, and he's had some various interviews. And I know, and we would have touched on it briefly, of course, Ron's been involved in some rather tragic and tough, very, very tough medical situations, a couple bouts with cancer and a stroke. And, as he got and gets into the sunset portion of his life, life hasn't been too kind. And I would have explored that, but probably kept it more to what I described just a little while ago with regards to how he became this big to do at KGO and garnered him local, national, international respect. That's what I know a lot of you looked forward to. And me interviewing him and talking to him about that was going to be, I think, very special and very cool. Unfortunately, I think Ron got, I think he got talked out of it too by his wife, who guards him, kind of a normally, spouse take care of their other spouse and look over them and all that. And Jan Black, whom is Ron's uh, wife for God over 40 years now. I think she was sensitive to the whole thing with regards to the daughter, their daughter, and how that could possibly be perhaps an opening for the other side to wean in on. So, look, I'll respect their decision. Am I angry? Um, a little bit, but not more disappointed because it happened, and it happened so soon after we, got the confirmation that he was going to do the interview. So, look, I'm not Mr. Perfect here. I'm not Larry King yet, but I try to do the best job that I can. Mostly because I love interviewing people, especially people that I'm interested in, and obviously, and want to bring to this site something new and different other than me doing monologues and giving you the latest news and scoops, etc. And I work hard to, still working hard to bring in people that I find would be unique and interesting and provocative and all that to the show. So, yes. And I wasn't going to respond to all this. I was just going to ignore it and move forward. But several of you reached out to me, and look, I'm still considered the black sheep of the Bay Area media because I rip and critique many a times, and I realize eventually that's going to take its toll on myself in terms of getting people, because a lot of people, frankly, are afraid for me to interview them. I don't think this was the situation here. I think it was more a case of what I just described, the current travails of Ron Owens' daughter, Laura, and her situation involving what she's involved in, which is in litigation. So I respect that part of his decision to cancel at the last minute. Well, it really wasn't the last minute, but it was twice. And so angry, no. Disappointed, yes. Life goes on. It's not going to take any toll. I'm working on several other major interviewees, some of whom I'm sure you know of, some you may not. But the main thing here is I live and die by this show. And part of my sort of preambles to you folks is that this show is not in any way, shape, or form traditional, nor the same kind of a quote professional show that others have in terms of look, in terms of graphics, in terms of content, in terms of production. I'm pretty much here because of me. And I'm talented enough and confident enough to know that a lot of you could frankly care less about guests. You want more of me. And I mean that in terms of opinion and scoops and maybe reflections and issues that most people will not talk about, even the bad stuff, even the negative stuff, because they're afraid of potential pissing off a client, an advertiser. I have no advertising by design. I go after you folks in terms of hopefully supporting me, contributing. Therefore, I'm not beholden to advertisers. I am here independently. And even though you may agree or disagree, that kind of a thing, you respect the fact that I'm able to talk free and not have to, worry about whether ad people are going to be, akin to, oh, we shouldn't go on Rich's show because he's the black sheep and we're not going to. Okay. So you make or break me in that regard. But back to the central point of doing this. I felt it was my duty to come clean with you guys. Not that I was going to hide anything. I just figured, why bring it up? Why talk about it? But people want to know. I posted something briefly on Twitter, which I removed because what's the purpose of highlighting and plugging something that was canceled? I could have gone on Twitter and said he canceled. I didn't want to do that either. So, look, I will respect Ron Owens' decision to not take part. And if he changes his mind in the future, perhaps we'll talk. But I'm not going to sit here and bash him. There's no reason to. He did what he had to do. His wife probably, in the same kind of light vein, did what she had to do. And move on. Like I said, folks, and I'm not saying this to, again, offer or elicit sympathy or whatever, but I am, one thing, I am mostly transparent. I do like explain a few things that you can't do anywhere else, that I wouldn't be able to, nor would I want to talk about something like that since it didn't happen. But one of the good things about this show is that I can do a little bit of a broadcast and tell you and explain to you why, if you tuned in on Thursday to see Ron, yes, unfortunately, there was no Ron because of what I just explained to you. And again, I want to make very, very clear. Um, yeah, there is still litigation involving his daughter and other parties. I'm not going to go deep into the weeds on that. I've explained to you it's not my cup of tea. I think there was other things involved? Yeah, and I just went over that too, and just leave it at that. But let me be very clear also to end this. Interviews don't make or break me. I love interviewing people. I especially love interviewing newsmakers and people that are involved or were involved in the business, because that's something that I like, and I think by extension you folks would like. So every now and then I'll have a guest on. And we've had some really terrific guests thus far. Local people, national people. I've got lots of individuals on the front burner, and once I get them individually confirmed, then of course they'll be on here. But mostly it's just you and me, and that'll do, and that's fine. I just wanted to explain the situation, and I have. So I hope me being transparent, that you got the answer that you were looking for. Again, I'm real sorry that we were not able to bring to you the Ron Owens interview, but who knows? Perhaps down the road, in the future, we'll be able to talk to him. If not, got to move on with life, right? Thanks.